morning and welcome everyone. My name is Nadia Badawi and I'm a project assistant at the Bulan Institute for Peace Innovations. So today we're starting a series of expert discussions in the framework of our climate change and renewable energy program of the Bulan Institute. So I will be moderating today's expert discussion with my colleague Hans.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this expert discussion on the development of green skills and energy education. My name is Hans Manjanos, and I'm also a project assistant at the Bulan Institute for Peace Innovations. And together with Nadia, we will be moderating this expert discussion. During the following 45 minutes, two experts will share their expertise on green skills development and their role in the renewable energy transition. On the one hand, Dr. Roman Bakulshuk is head of Climate and Energy Research Group at the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs in Norway. He holds a PhD in economics obtained from Jakobs University, Clemen in Germany, and he provides commentaries to Foreign Policy, the World Economic Forum, The Diplomat, and many other journals and international media. He also publishes on energy transition, renewable energy, sustainability education, critical materials, climate change, investment policy, and economic transition in Kazakhstan and Central Asia.
On the other hand, our second panelist for this expert discussion is Mr. Alberto Frigerio. With our decade of experience and a proven track record of success in academia, Dr. Frigerio is a professor of international relations at Almaty Management University in Kazakhstan. Among his duties, he teaches the course of Sustainable Development Principles and Practice to bachelor students of international relations and conducts research activities in the area of sustainability and civic responsibilities. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Frigerio. So with our speakers being introduced, I think we're ready to start our expert discussion with a global outlook. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Roman Bakulchuk. So can we start with a discussion of green skills and if the countries really need them? And what is the current situation with green education in the world? Because you have conducted research and concluded that even universities do not teach green skills. So how serious is the situation? And if we want to mitigate climate change and do not have enough green skills, is it something to worry about?
First of all, thank you very much, Nadia Cholpon, the Bulan Peace Institute. It's a pleasure to be invited and contribute to this important debate. It's also a pleasure to share the panel with Alberto. And I had the pleasure of attending digitally his presentation 2 weeks ago about green skills in Kazakhstan. So it was a very interesting session. And I'm glad that today we can share our insights on the work that we have been doing. And coming back, Nadia, to your last point, and the question is about whether we should be worried. I think if we talk about meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement and keeping the temperatures pretty low, yes, we should be worried because the deficit and the increasing shortage of green skills is already posing many challenges and risks. I should say, let me start from the point that for the first time, investment in renewable energy globally exceeded the investment in oil and gas in 2016. It's for the first time that this happened. It means that back then, the world has been already moving pretty fast towards green energy. And here I'm talking about deployment of renewables, wind, solar, and hydropower. And it means that we can see the acceleration of the investment in this area. And this has been also happening in some other areas where many public utilities companies, private sector companies have been also undergoing significant shifts and changes across many countries, not only in the developed countries, but also in many other countries of Asia, for example, such as China, India, Vietnam, and many others. Yet, at the same time, as a researcher, I haven't seen much focus and discussion that would focus on the green skills. We know that many international organizations like IRENA, International Energy Agency, OECD, have for long focused on the employment side of renewable energy. And many times we've seen their reports where they emphasized how important it is to look at the renewable energy from the point of view of job creation. However, very much limited focus on the supply side. So if we're talking about the increase in renewable energy jobs, where do we get the skilled labor, right? I think that was a very a reasonable question to ask. And that's what we did back in 2020, where we wanted to look at the entire world. And we did a study by analyzing 18,000 universities in 196 countries. So we really wanted to see how things have been developing and evolving over time in terms of renewable energy education. So each of those universities we took as one unit of basic research, and we looked at whether universities had faculties in oil and gas, coal, or renewable energy, and also whether universities also offered degrees in oil and gas, coal, or renewable energy, because we wanted to compare the total share, whether the world still focuses on fossil fuels or renewable energy. And what we found was quite striking in the sense that we found that the data for 2020 showed us that 68% of all world's energy degrees are still focusing on oil and gas. So you can imagine that thousands, even I would say in some, or it's probably we are talking about millions of students are trained to work in the oil and gas sector. While we see this, exponential demand for green skills. Recently, the International Energy Agency and also several other organizations show that out of, for example, the proportion of workers in the energy sector, only 1 employee out of 8 has relevant energy and green energy skills. 1 to 8, this is really a small ratio. And it shows that if we look at the university sector and higher education in general, probably this area has been quite slow and now probably one of the slowest in terms of transitioning to renewable energy. And this is quite, I would say, striking, but also worrying in the sense that we know that any education is a very long-term investment. So you can't expect such a rapid change as, for example, if you install solar panels or wind farms, you can get electricity pretty fast from this change, right? But if you invest in human capital, you would expect the return on your investment in many years from now, right? It's a long-term process. So it means that universities had actually be the first one in this whole energy transition debate, and they would have to be, I would say, pretty much on the forefront, which they haven't. And this constitutes a major problem. So we also know that the expectation is that the share of additional and new jobs in renewable energy will have to be more than 50 million by 2050. And this, I think, is pretty modest estimate. So the more there is renewable energy developed, the more green skills would be needed across the world. In our study, what we found is that this situation with the lack of green energy education is not only relevant for developing countries of Asia, Central Asia, Africa, but it's also holds true for the many developed countries, like those global hubs of education, for example, the UK, the US, where you still have many universities which maintain large faculties of oil and gas or coal studies. We're talking about many professors who still get their salary, they still prepare, specialists who would be then supposed to be working in the oil and gas sector. And this, of course, is a problem because this would, what we call, produce graduates with stranded skills which will no longer be needed in the future. And in order to retrain this workforce, we are also talking about time. A lot of time would be needed to retrain, for example, oil and gas engineers, to retrain them to be to have skills relevant for the clean energy sector. So the situation, as I said, is quite worrying. Also, if you look at the agenda of many international organizations, they don't specify, they don't have education as their priority area. This, in our view, is also a major problem. So you could probably ask why this is happening and why this is the case. I think there are 2 major structural issues. First is, of course, the issue of carbon lock-in. We know that the oil and gas industry have for many decades been influencing the university sector, and of course, there was a high demand for engineers, specialists in the oil and gas sector. And because there's this tradition of universities, faculties to reproduce this workforce, this creates this effects of lock-in where it's really difficult to change. And of course, universities being an important societal player, they are also quite resistant to change. It means that they continue to maintain those faculties, they continue to produce graduates for the fossil fuel industries, and they are very slow to introduce, or for example, establish a new faculties for clean energy like solar or wind. And also most of the education is still channeled towards the needs of the fossil fuel industry, because there's no, first of all, global donor who would support largely the investment in green skills at the university sector. Plus, we also have inertia at the ministerial level, where, for example, ministries of education, they continue to allocate funding for universities, which then specialize in oil and gas industry. Also, we looked at the such issue as accreditation, because there's quite a, I would say, limited tradition of clean energies in energy studies. In some countries, you don't have a developed system for fast tracking accreditation, for example, for new renewable energy programs. And while it's quite easy for many universities to establish new programs in oil and gas studies, some struggle to get a quick approval for establishing and being accredited for new solar or wind energy programs. It means that at the level of accreditation, there's also, you can see that it's very difficult to promote clean energy education. The second structural problem is that renewable energy remains greatly underfinanced. So higher education, they have not been, institutions in the higher education haven't seen much pressure from different NGOs, from global clean energy community. Of course, it's understandable that's very important to focus on making the transition happen, and actually in terms of the energy input itself, so that of course we have more clean energy installed and deployed. But we already have the situation that, this is from my experience in many countries in Asia, where you have very limited workforce for new renewable energy projects. And often we see the situation that governments say, well, we will wait with the new projects in clean energy because we want the workforce to be done with this with other ongoing project. And this can take 1 or 2 years because they don't have any additional workforce. They just have to wait before other projects are completed. And it means that this whole situation slows down quite significantly the transition to renewable energy. And of course, with more transition, the skills deficit will also continue to grow. And I'm pretty sure that it would be very difficult to solve this issue unless we pay more attention to it from the point of view of the scientific community, from the point of view of NGOs. So we should also see universities as an important player in the energy transition. And I think it's important also to start questioning their existing practices in terms of clean energy education. And I would rather stop here, and then of course would be happy to continue the dialogue.
Thank you very much for addressing insights regarding the crucial role of academia during the transition, and also for highlighting structural educational, workforce, and procedural challenges. Mr. Roman, our climate change and renewable energy program at the Bulan Institute for Peace Innovations is having a special focus on Central Asia. And now I would like to shift our discussion towards Kazakhstan. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Alberto Frigeiro. So could you please provide us insights regarding the status of green skills in Kazakhstan, and tell us more about if there is enough specialized professionals in the country focusing on these green initiatives? Also, maybe you could address during your intervention, what efforts has the government made to develop solar or other green skills? Since you, as a professional and a professor of international relations, have done such an extensive research on the topic, and this will be very much appreciated. Thank you once again for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Hans, Nadia, and Bulan Institute for this opportunity to talk about a really important topic for me. And let me say that I completely share what Roman just said about the state of green skills development worldwide. So that's why this is a sensible topic that we need to discuss and talk more about it. Now, to start, let me contextualize a bit my research on green skills development in Kazakhstan. So basically, in the framework of a project that was financed by UNEP and coordinated by Kazakh German University, I was invited to conduct studies about the state of green jobs and skills development in Kazakhstan. Actually, the project entailed the analysis of two countries, Kazakhstan and Georgia, as representative of Caucasus and Central Asia. And the idea is to have a first preliminary understanding about what is the status of green jobs and skills development in these two countries, so that in a second phase, we might extend the analysis to the whole region, to the whole state of Caucasus and Central Asia. Now, before jumping to the aspect of green skills in Kazakhstan, let me say a few considerations, let me raise a few considerations about the state of the green transition in Kazakhstan. So, on the whole, Kazakhstan is still in an early stage of green transition, but the government has already established some important pillars for smooth transition, both from a policy perspective as well as from a legal point of view. So key milestones include the approval of the law on support for the use of renewable energy, the concept for the transition of green economy, the new environmental code of 2021, as well as the doctrine for achieving carbon neutrality by 2060. So the ground for a green transition has already been built, and some results are already visible. So for example, nowadays, the share of renewable energies in the production of the total electricity in the country has reached quota 5%, which is somehow a good result if we compare to just 3-5 years ago, which was around 1%. Okay. And yet, notwithstanding such noteworthy results, there is, first of all, a lack of statistical data about the green job and green skills development in Kazakhstan. And such a condition, of course, constrains the capacity to conduct in-depth assessment of what is happening in the country and how we should intervene. So somehow to overcome such a constraint or such a limit, what I tried to do was to address the state of green skills in Kazakhstan by considering two different sources. So on one side, I checked online recruiting platforms such as LinkedIn and Headhunters to identify which skills were required in the posted green job calls. And on the other side, I conducted a series of interviews with representatives from academia and the business sector and asking them what are and what will be the most demanded green skills in the country. Let me add that when I conducted this analysis, I made reference to green jobs as any kind of job in any sector aimed to contribute to preserve, restoring, and enhancing environmental protection, as well as supporting the development of sustainable practice. This means that in this broad definition included both dedicated green jobs, which are specifically aimed to preserve the environment and promote green goals, but also I considered integrated green jobs, so in which green skills and sustainability practice are incorporated into existing professions. So, for example, a dedicated green job could be seen as a person who works as a manager for a natural reserve, okay, and has the specific goal to protect the environment. While an integrated green job is a person who actually dedicated his career as professional in finance, but then decided to take a path in green finance. So the focus of this person is not the direct preservation of the environment, but indirectly, by promoting green finance, he or she can contribute to the development of sustainable practices. Now, what my study reveals is that, first of all, there is a huge gap, as mentioned before by Roman, in the area of renewable energy. This means that not only we need engineers with a focus on green energies, but also there is a need of technicians with the capacity to install and maintain solar panels, wind turbines, and etc. Okay. So this was an element that was basically underlined by interviewees, but also emerged from my analysis from LinkedIn and Headhunter, so such type of platforms. The second aspect that I can identify here is that there is a lack of green skills in managerial positions. So basically, there is a need of people with advanced levels of understanding and abilities in areas like environmental law, environmental economics, sustainable natural resource management, water management, climate change expertise, and so on. The third area that seems lacking personal and in which actually some skills need to be developed is the one related to green documentation. So all those aspects associated with ESG foundation and sustainability reporting in its diverse means and diverse ways. So these are somehow the main areas in which we have observed a green skill gap. But I might add also that from a broader perspective, there is also a growing demand of people who possess soft skills associated with environmental awareness and system thinking approaches. So even in jobs that are not directly related to the preservation of the environment or sustainability goals, anyway, a system thinking approach is in high demand right now. So the capacity to understand problems from a comprehensive perspective. Now, if this is the scenario, now one of the current challenges is that there is a notable gap in understanding the role of green skills among the population of Kazakhstan. I will say that positively, something is changing in the sense that there are nowadays some universities, a few, still a few, but there are at least some of them in Kazakhstan that are trying to integrate green skills and sustainability principles in their curricula. They are trying promoting experiential learning as well as developing green campus initiatives. Likewise, we have some institutions, like, for example, Kazakh Green Association, Green Academy, ESGQ, who are providing professional training in the green sector. So we are observing some changes in the educational perspective. And what is interesting is that they are still moving on a trial mode. So they are trying to promote green skills following different models of development. So some of them are focusing on green campuses, others are providing master degrees in renewable energy and water resource management. Others, like Almaty Management University, where work are progressively integrating green principle and green skills within traditional curricula and to provide a comprehensive understanding of this principle and try to make students apply them in the framework of students' project in cooperation with international institutions. So something is changing. But of course, this is really an early stage. So the capacity and even desire or interest of institutions to embrace such change is still limited. My hope is that this university, however, will represent as a kind of point of reference for other institutes, then we'll try to follow the example. But of course, positive results need to be shown in order to be appealing. And well, basically, what I can say is that probably up to now, there are still some barriers constraining such transformation. Perhaps the main one first is a resistance to change that actually was already mentioned before. The second one is still a limited opportunity or limited amount of opportunities to develop green skills in Kazakhstan. And the third one is a lack of a systemic approach to face the matter. So we don't have yet a system of cooperation between all the stakeholders at stake. So governmental institutions, business, NGOs, and higher education cooperating all together to understand exactly which skills are needed and how to provide them not only in class, so knowledge, but also with experiential learning processes in cooperation with business organizations. And so for me to overcome these barriers and foster an environment conducive to effective development adoption of green skills in Kazakhstan, it's really important to create a comprehensive plan where all the stakeholders at stake will cooperate and will provide a significant contribution to the development of green skills in Kazakhstan. That's what we really need. I will stop here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Frigerio. It was very interesting and really insightful. Thank you for providing insights into your study on the green skills, on the state of green skills in Kazakhstan. And you've mentioned that your study revealed that Kazakhstan not only needs engineers, but also technical jobs. And there's a lack of green skills on the managerial level. But you've also mentioned some positive tendencies, like the growing understanding of the importance of green skills at the population of Kazakhstan, and some challenges that Kazakhstan is facing, and the green transition, and then providing the green skills. So I would like to follow up with a question to Mr. Vakarchuk. So could you tell us more why renewable energy adoption is important now, and why don't we pay attention to it 5 or 10 years ago? And also, which countries have more green skills compared to other countries? Mr. Vakarchuk.
Well, thank you, Nadia, for your question. I think, well, there are several important aspects that I will put in my response. First of all, I think that there's a general tendency, and which I find quite problematic, and that's the focus on engineering and technologies as the main driver of change. So I think there is a strong belief that whenever there is a new technology on the market, say there is a new type of solar panels which will save the world, many believe that societal change will follow, that the mindsets of people will follow. So what we need is we need a technology. And this can be found in many other industries, in many other sectors. And that's why, while there's been so much focus investment in the first place on the creation of new technologies, there's often very limited focus on basically how to make people change their mindsets, how to make sure there's a wide adoption and acceptance of renewable energy, for example. And I think this was also the case with renewable energy education, where I think that the international community probably thought, well, once we start accelerating the deployment of solar panels, of wind farms, small-scale hydro projects, people will follow, universities will also shift, and students will also, swiftly change their interests and their focus. But this is something that hasn't happened, unfortunately, and we are already seeing the basically the results of the lack of reform in this area. And maybe at some point when the growth of renewables was quite small, or say limited, where the world had some workforce to fill in the gaps. I think from 2020, we've seen even more kind of expanding and exponential growth in renewable energy projects. And that's why where probably this the shortage of skills has become really apparent and obvious to many. And I've been also in dialogue with the UN agencies about this topic. They also think that, well, this is an area that hasn't really received necessary attention many times, many years ago, so to say. This is why it's the time to catch up. But of course, it's very difficult to do it in once, because we are talking about very many interest groups. We're talking about also reforming not only universities, but we also need to talk, as actually Alberto also said correctly, about changing the government approach to this, also the private sector. Today, we don't see much of the interest, or at least so far, from the private companies, for example, to cooperate and create collaborations with universities. But I think there's a lot of opportunities for example, offering internships to students to work and be, for example, doing some internship for 5-6 months in a private company, to work at, say, at a wind farm to get practical experience, and also then by doing that to get the necessary skills. So changing universities is very important, but we should also note that, and also I agree with Alberto, that there are also some jobs which do not require many resources and time for reskilling. And this can be, for example, managerial type of jobs. So for that, you don't really need to change completely your education. Like if we talk about oil engineers and solar engineers, in that case, yes, we need 4 or 5 years of total reskilling and getting a new education. But when it comes to some more managerial positions, or say more economic positions within the industry, there I think it's possible to do the reskilling, upgrading of skills. And so this should be also like a separate area where all the parties should be involved in order to see how to make it work, how to make sure that we get people with the right skills by means of retraining them. So that's very important. And I believe that this is particularly important for Central Asia also, because from my dialogue with some local renewable energy companies, when I ask them about how they deal with the lack of skilled labor, they often say that now we try to recruit people in Pakistan, in India, and this often comes at a high cost, because bringing expats is often a very expensive matter. So they need to pay 3-4 times more than they would pay to locals, which would be available, but they're not. So this actually indicates some of the already, increasing shortages. And I think we are already late with this reform, but I think it's really important to find a way to optimize the production of human capital by means that Frigerio mentioned, but also by means of bringing more attention to this, with the help of international organizations, donors, and also international NGO stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bakulchuk. I think it's very insightful the way you have described the approach and the systemic approach from international organizations, governments, businesses, and also NGOs, how they play a crucial role in this energy transition. Now, I have a brief question for Mr. Alberto Frigerio to keep the conversation going, even though we have still some 8 minutes, more or less. So could you please elaborate on the obstacles and challenges that Central Asia is currently facing? And considering the potential transition to green initiatives, how do you perceive the significance of addressing issues such as the skill shortages and knowledge gaps within these countries?
Well, yeah, thank you for your question. We'll have different types of challenges up to now in the country, but perhaps I still agree that one of the main challenge is a cultural one. So we can have the best technology available, but if people are not culturally used and aware about how to use them, we will not be able to embrace a sustainability path as we would like. So the cultural element is really key important component here, and you can develop it only through education and by sharing information and by making everyone aware about what do you mean with such kind of green transition and which kind of results you want to achieve. Now, so beyond that, well, we have a series of barriers that are associated, of course, to a resistance to change, which means that when you have to reform the system, even the economic system by itself, in order to embrace a circular economy, this entails a series of transformation that requires times, but also requires people to adapt to them. And not always institutions and people are ready to change, just due to the fact that they are used to certain custom and they want to maintain them. We have some issues related to investments. I mean, of course, we are assisting to a growing interest and a growing attention to our renewable energies. But for example, in areas in a country like Kazakhstan, the subsidies to our fossil fuels are still too high compared to the advantages you can gain by investing in renewable energies. And of course, this is a problem because that means that from a financial perspective, we didn't change yet enough the system to favor the spread and development of renewable energies in the country. We have some barriers related to policy and legal measure. Now, from this perspective, I would say that Kazakhstan has a quite good legislative framework, so not so many laws, but the ones that have been developed are quite comprehensive, and they have been upgraded enough well to embrace the new circumstances and to support a green transition process. And the fact that they are effective is due to is associated to the fact that they are well balanced with the development of the new policy. So the green policy on green transition, policy on carbon neutrality, that meanwhile the government has approved. However, we still lack some fundamental aspect, for example, to reduce the bureaucratization of the process related to the launching of new businesses for renewable energies or other green area activities. So the process needs to be simplified, it has to be transparent, and it has to be clear what can be done in which tempistic and with which type of results. Likewise, we have a kind of problem. We have a series of problems related to what I mentioned earlier, which is the lack of data. We have good statistical data in Kazakhstan, but we don't have, for example, about in which area companies or foreign direct investors were directing their attention, which businesses are growing, and so on. But we have really too limited data about green jobs and skills in the country. Now, and this is also due to the fact that we still miss a statistical definition of green jobs. And without that, without that and without data, how you can provide in-depth assessment about which type of interventions are needed in order to improve the situation. So here, what I would suggest is that plausibly we'll need a national statistical coverage in Kazakhstan, but I believe in the whole Central Asian region, about the state of green jobs development and which area, which numbers, and which kind of effect this has produced. It's not so impossible to do that because from a methodological perspective, we have already organizations like International Labour Organization and UNDP who have established the mechanism about how to do that. But we need to do it because without that, we don't have enough data to proceed. And perhaps one last barrier that I would like to mention here is that, again, we counted too much on the technological aspect, on the aspect on innovation, but we miss the link with society. And again, to do that, I'm really supportive of creating a framework in which diverse stakeholders might provide a structured cooperative condition for the development of green skills and green jobs in the country. again, we really started to have that. So, for example, we start to have in my university an office for the commercialization of innovative ideas created locally. But we need to connect, I mean, it's like a puzzle. We need to connect all different pieces. We need to connect business, we need to connect in education, working on innovation as well as promoting of ideas. We need to connect civil society so that they will be aware about what is happening, and we need to engage the government so that it will provide the proper framework over which we can support a positive green transition. Without that, we risk to have an unbalanced condition in which one areas might develop well, but while all the others stacked, and so we don't have a massive response to the transformation that we are assisting. Again, we have the opportunity to embrace renewable energy projects, but we don't have profiles in academia ready to do that, or we don't have components of civil society ready to use renewable energies in their facilities. And that's a big problem, because it will reduce our capacity to achieve and to maximize the results.
So I think that we can wrap up our expert discussion on the development of green skills and energy education and the name of the Bulan Institute. So I would like to extend our gratitude to Dr. Roman Vakulchuk and Mr. Alberto Frigerio for your invaluable contributions. Dr. Vakulchuk, your insights into the current importance of renewable energy adoption and the comparative expertise among nations shed light on crucial aspects of the global transition towards sustainability. Additionally, your identification of countries leading in green skills development provides valuable guidance for future initiatives.
And Mr. Frigedo, your expertise in the challenges faced by Central Asia, particularly in addressing skill shortages and data and knowledge gaps, underscores the significance of targeted interventions and in fostering green initiatives within this region. So thank you both for enlightening perspectives and enriching our discussion with your expertise. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you to the Bulan Institute. And I think we can close the expert discussion. Thank you very much once again, and have a great day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Hans, Nadia.